Today's shoot is all about the look that you get from photographing with a wide-angle lens versus a telephoto. Knowing how your lenses see is such an important aspect of your ability to compose stronger photographs. So let's dive in and take a look at some real-world examples. Okay, we're going to take this lens conversation a little bit further. And what I think that many photographers could benefit from is knowing a couple of key recipes for creating depth effects in their shots. So I'm going to stick with my wide-angle lens for the moment, and we're going to work with a different subject this time. To illustrate the recipe, I'm going to get my lens very close to this stack of old wheels. This is going to give me a really interesting look because my wide-angle lens really enhances the depth effect when it's close to the foreground. The wide field of view that this lens has allows it to exaggerate the relationship between near and far elements in the scene. It can focus very closer than most of the other lenses in my bag, and the differences between items that are near in the shot and further away are going to be exaggerated. If I step back from my foreground, that relationship is no longer exaggerated. So the relative distances between points in my scene relative to the camera gets reduced as the distance increases. So everything feels more or less like it's taken at the same distance to the camera. When I say close, I mean close. In my humble opinion, the most boring way to photograph is with a wide-angle lens from a safe, comfortable distance. Totally boring. So get the lens right in there so that the viewer feels like they're right in the middle of things. And by the way, don't forget that aperture. The closer I get to my subject, the more careful I need to be with regard to depth of field. Check out the difference here. Now as I close my aperture, I can almost hear some of you moaning about the use of higher ISO settings that will be necessary to balance out this exposure. But this is what I have to say about that. A little bit of grain in the image is not the end of the world, especially when we're shooting black and white in a gritty environment like this one. I would rather have the picture with the appropriate depth of field and work on reducing the digital noise in Lightroom afterwards, which actually works surprisingly well. Many photographers are actually unaware of how far they can push their camera's ISO setting. So if you've never shot with your camera's higher ISO values before, do an experiment and compare the results. These days we can shoot with some cameras at ISO 3200, 6400, or even 12,800 and get results that look like ISO 800 did back in the film days. Okay, now that we know how to create this depth effect in our shots, let's explore another recipe as we look at isolating a single subject. For that, we're going to need to continue exploring. Okay, we've found an interesting detail to work with here, and in many ways we're going to take an opposite approach to what we did with the wheels a moment ago. So I'm going to start by changing my lens to the 70-200, which has a much narrower field of view. Remember, the longer the lens, the easier it is to be selective about your background. I also want to blur out the chaos behind my subject and reduce the sharpness on all those lines and shapes back there to make the background a little bit less distracting. This goes back to making it easier for my viewer to understand what my subject is. If the background competes for attention, then the message is much less clear. So I'm going to also open up my aperture in this case to create some of that separation between the subject and the background. In addition, I'm going to be very intentional about what's in or not in my shot just by moving a few centimeters to the right or left as I look through the lens. Luckily, this lens has a wide maximum 2.8 aperture, allowing me to really blur things out back there. But if your lens doesn't open up to f2.8, you can still achieve this effect by simply taking a few steps closer to your subjects. So there you go, I've just saved you $1,000 on a new lens. Getting closer is something that often helps improve composition anyways, so give this a try the next time you're shooting, especially if you're the type of person who finds yourself cropping most of your pictures in the computer. By the way, it really is important to remember that this recipe is a combination of using a longer lens with a wider aperture setting. No matter how hard I try, I'll never be able to create the same degree of background blur with my wide-angle lens that I can with my telephoto, even though both lenses open up to a maximum f2.8 aperture. Let me take the chance to quickly tell you about the fantastic courses that we run over at viewfindermastery.com. If you want to learn photography in a clear and structured way from professional photography educators, then come and check us out over at viewfindermastery.com. We've got courses in all kinds of photography topics, from portraiture and sports photography to landscape and Lightroom, you name it. Of course, you don't have to take my word for it. We've got great customer ratings, so just check out our Google and Facebook ratings to hear what others are saying first, and then I would love to see you join us over at viewfindermastery.com. I would love to hear from you down in the comments below. Please like and share this video with your photography friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.